Some brands are legendary. In every category, someone sets the standard, and some companies create raving fans. Join Scott Wozniak and Caitlin Johnson of Swaz Consulting as we dig into the tactics and tools behind great organizations. How did the legends do it? And how can you become a legendary brand too? Our guest today is Ben Elmore. Ben Elmore has spent over 20 years driving digital transformations, generating a whopping $21 billion plus in enterprise value for his clients. Launching 9 startups, he's the chairman of the consulting firm Intevity, and there he's helped industry leaders from Under Armour to the intelligence community build digital experiences that currently serve millions daily. His current mission is equipping faith-based organizations to thrive in the digital era. He's a founder now of another consulting group called Servant, and with that, he's partnered with The Chosen, YouVersion, and One Hope, which are some of the largest faith-based groups in the world, and they are all combining cutting-edge tech with deep ministry insight. By the way, beyond the boardroom, Ben owns that he's a self-proclaimed nerd. He's a deep-sea fishing adventurer, and as he says, is most important of all, a devoted husband and father of 5. He is all about leaving a legacy at this stage in his life, solving big problems, investing in people, living out a bold faith. I think you're going to see why Ben has become one of my best buddies to hang with. So welcome, Ben Elmore. Hey, welcome to the show, Ben. Man, it's so exciting to have you here because it's not just a fun friend to hang out with, which you certainly have been one of my best friends these years. Man, guys, if you follow the podcast, you know we do customer experience and employee experience and all this stuff, but we don't do this alone. A lot of times we get into projects with our customers and the tactical tools or the specific thing they need to build is not something we build. And so we find world-class partners over the years. And we're like, actually, and this is a great example, Ben, what you specialize in is something that people need, and I don't specialize in, getting all this digital stuff and helping them actually create the strategy and the tools. And now I'm putting words in your mouth. So why don't we just kind of start and talk tell us a little bit about what does that mean to do these digital transformations? Like, give us some examples of how you've shown up and actually helped people.
Well, thanks first off, Scott, for having me here. It's great to be able to sort of hang with you and talk about some of our favorite subjects together. You know, I always say that my best work is done in collaboration and my best collaborations are done with great people. And you are certainly a great person and just enjoyed the friendship that's been there. And so, yeah, we're really big in this concept of partnership because ultimately, in order to serve a customer well, you need to bring a lot of different expertise to the table. And if you can find experts that you can really trust that own very specific lanes, you just find that the work you create is magic. And that's what we do together. So definitely the work you've done around thinking through the customer experience engines that organizations have to sort of really touch the customer across all the physical different and digital touch points and think about the powerful employee experiences that are needed in order to power those sort of things is really it's incredible to observe. And where our partnership has come in with organization is to say, like, as you're defining new ways of engaging with your customer, how do you use technology in a powerful way to drive that forward? Digital transformation is one of those fun buzzwords. I always laugh that I think our industry, you have to poke fun at yourself a little bit. Gotcha. It's like so good at buzzword bingo. Like we use energy. That's another really great one for us. We get paid by the PowerPoint, all that goodness like that. And so, but really when you think about it, one of the things I love to do is try to all right, how do I cut through all that noise and just make things really simple? Because as leaders, our challenge is we have to we're pushing into this constant state of new that comes out. The rate of innovation right now is like every couple of weeks, you're just seeing this massive breakthroughs in technology. And the question is, how do I sort through that in a way that actually allows me to grow my business? Because at the end of the day, technology, customer experiences by themselves don't do anything. It's really about how does a business serve its customer and grow? And that's what we're about. So digital transformation, when I kind of try to simplify it all the way down, is the application of new technologies and customer trends to drive a business forward. and bringing those into and then changing the way that you operate in order to take advantage of these new technologies and customer trends. That's what the transformational moment is all about. And you do a great job as in our partnership of really helping a customer, helping an organization really think about what is the engine that's driving our customer forward. And then we just come alongside that and say, all right, how does it actually change the way that you operate from an operating model perspective? What are the technologies that we use? How do we sort of apply AI and data in really thoughtful ways in order to make sure that that customer experience is driven to the next level, next height?
Yeah, I love this because one of the quotes that I love slash hate is that every great idea eventually degenerates into hard work, or maybe like it turns into a tactical tool, and you got to show up with something digital, and then the staff actually has to operate with it, and we run across these folks who have these lovely grand aspirations, and they haven't been able to translate that into a real tool and a real experience. And man, the real reality of today is if you aren't showing up digitally, you are missing a huge chunk of your customer experience. Sure, you can be lovely and nice in person, but even the most kind of brick and mortar physical spaces these days have a massive digital component to them, let alone the actual direct consumer retail stuff. And so it's a huge deal, but yeah, I'm like, I know about it and I care about it, but this is a perfect partnership. And I think this is the kind of thing that'd be good for all of you to think about is what is your specialty? And rather than me trying to figure out how to go do all the digital stuff myself, it's like, we know just enough to know like, oh, you need to rethink this. And then like, well, how do we do it? And where do we get the best tool? And who's going to build that for us is like, well, dang it, why don't we bring in the digital experts for that part of the conversation? And so it's this combo of like, we need the team to get the concept and the idea, but we also need the actual tool. And so yeah,
Yeah.
super
I have
valuable.
I have a question, Ben. So I've worked in an organization where the term digital transformation was scary. It's so much so that the change management team at that company reworded it to say we're going to do an optimization and just slash the word transformation altogether because of bad juju, bad, experiences of previous transformations. And I was looking at your background in history, and there was something that really stood out to me around people first mentality. And so I'm curious, as you work with organizations in digital transformations, how do you blend those two together, people and tech? Because I think it's people, process, and technology, like the stack of those items.
Yeah, that's a great question, Caitlin. This stuff can be really scary for it. I think that digital transformation really took hold in 2016, 17 is when you started to really see this come into the forefront, because what you had is kind of reached these key critical masses in terms of the way technology has been adopted. And so for a long time, we thought about technology as being something that was additive to an organization. And what you saw is that organizations that were outpacing everyone else had figured out how to bring technology and digital into the core aspect in which the core expression of itself. So you move from being something on the outside to actually saying like, how do we run and have all of our internal operations think through this? And so you hear these digital first or, companies, and that's what origin was. And so that represents a lot of shift for organizations. And so you have to, blend those two pieces together really well. When we've thought about these digital transformation engagements that we've done, we've kind of created the top 5 reasons on why these efforts fail. And one of them is that they don't take enough time to really walk the organization through change.
Mm.
Think about, what does it take for me to reset the mindset of an organization? So we use different frameworks. One of them is we use a digital maturity framework to really kind of understand, what's the organization's posture? Because one of the things that can be really disruptive for an organization is if you try to move them in a place that they don't want to go, or too far, or we don't do it in a sequential way that brings them along a journey. So if someone is like really early in their digital world, going ahead and trying to have them adopt the latest of operating models, the latest of the technology out there, can really break them, because the rate of change would be too much for them to do. So you have to really factor in the people side, because they will your employees, like I always say from a leader, Scott, you and I have talked about this. When people don't work for us, we work for them.
Mm.
You can't just go ahead and mandate. If you think about it, when's the last time you said, do this thing, giving them no context whatsoever? How well did that actually work in your organization?
Yeah.
No, yeah, that doesn't work. People think it does. Let's be clear.
Well,
Like their leaders like work that way, but
face, they'll say, "Sir, yes, sir," right? Yes, ma'am, I'm doing it. And then, yeah, like as soon as you're gone next week, they go back. Oh, yeah, that's
They revert back to what they know, they revert back to the patterns and behaviors that they have. And so part of the digital transformation, especially as you're looking to bring digital from maybe the outside into the kind of the core way you operate, is actually stepping that change into the organization in a way where you're retraining their behavior. And if you don't respect that aspect, what you get is a poor adoption rate. And therefore, what you'll do is like these transformational moments can be really expensive for an organization. They're also the most important thing to do, but also the most expensive thing to do. And so if you don't take the time to sort of like, how do I step people into the new way in which we're going to operate, then what you do is you're undermining your investment. And so when we found with technology, digital, like in this digital transformation world, is like we see technology is only a third of what this is about. There's two other aspects that I found. And so you got to look at this thing holistically. This is why, if you look at all the reports, digital transformation efforts have a 70% failure rate.
Mm.
Now, we've been able to sort of successfully do an 85% success rate. So we've inverted that. But the reason why is because we look at this holistically. Too many times people will run towards technology.
Yeah.
And try to solve that. But here's a secret we can all in, which I guess is no longer a secret after saying it. It's like technology is biased. It has a point of view on how work should be done.
Mm.
I've just automated a point of view. If I'm going e-commerce, I adopt a piece of a piece of technology, right, to sell. It has a way in which it thinks your shopping experience should be, that your checkout experience should be. It is biased to the way that work should be done. If I'm doing B2B, it has a way in which proposals are sent out, the way that payments are sent out, the way that bill of goods are built. Everything has your customer experience. It has a point of view. So if you move to technology too soon without actually assessing your business and saying what you want, what you do is you buy something that may actually be orthogonal to how you actually operate. And that's the point of friction. So moving to technology too soon actually creates a high degree of risk. You also have the risk of overbuying. So what we look at is like, you have to take a look at this holistically. One aspect of it for us is the organizational dynamics, which is all about people. How do I reset the processes? How do I reset the comp structures? How do I sort of make sure the department is available to sort of have real-time engagement with customers in an online channel? And then, of course, I have to then take the third part of what we found, which is everything has to be rooted in value. How does this create value for a customer? How does this create value for a company? And if any one of those three things are off, the transformation effort has a high probability of failure.
Yeah. Yeah. And then you're worse off. It's not just like nothing happens. You've annoyed your team, often frustrated your customers because you do this weird zigzag thing for them. You blew money on it and your team's trust is down. It's like literally worse off with no benefit. It's not a good setup, man.
Right.
Yeah. There's a lot of things to unpack there. I'll underline one of them, and that is the matching the technology to the level of the people. Rather than making the people squeeze into the square peg, round hole, peg, one of those. Get the ball and the peg matching, right? Like literally. So the formula reminds me of formula. One of my mentors at Chick-fil-A taught me was Q times A equals E. Q is quality, A is adoption, and E is effectiveness. And he kept saying to me, so early in the days, I designed these perfect master systems that nobody wanted to adopt. And he's like, Scott, we're not paid for Q, we're paid for E. And so like, if you want to do the math, he does like, you keep designing these perfect 10 systems that like it's Q times A, not plus A, times A. And this is important. because if like a perfect 10 system that a 2 out of 10 adoption rate happens, I'm getting in my formula a 20 effectiveness value for the organization. He's like, if you back that down to like an 8, which is like, wait a minute, why would I ever do not perfect 10? Well, because if that 8 gets adopted by 5, we have doubled our effectiveness for the organization by pulling some of this back. I mean, I'll tell you one of the other phrases he used in this conversation is thinking for me. So his mother, he and his brother were the first generation college kids, and very smart family, but they're from kind of middle South Georgia. This was not a part of their culture. And so his parents were like, you're going to do this, you're going to go to college. But they came back, and he said they'd be sitting around the kitchen table, him and his brother, and they'd start talking. And his mom be like, now, boys, I know y'all smart, but you still talk the way regular talk to your mother. And the way she would say it is, don't talk college to me. And so occasionally they'd get all too fancy, and she'd be like, boys, your college is showing again. Don't let your college show. And so this is what Mark Miller's the guy, the mentor of mine. He would say to me, is Mark would say, hey, Scott, I love that you're really smart and have all those cool degrees. It's part of why we hired you. But if you can't translate this down into a way that they can use and make sense, it's not Q times A. And so occasionally for shorthand, he'd even just say, hey, Scott, your college is showing it again. Don't let your college.
Yeah.
All right.
That's fascinating.
How do we match this to the people so the people actually like it and use it? That's the point. That's and it. I mean, I have to say, Ben, you're one of the smartest guys I know. It is. I think it takes a certain amount of that servant leader mentality. I mean, I think that's what you were talking about before. I mean, if I'm a real transparent, maybe this isn't you, but me. Part of why I like to talk fancy is because then I feel smart. Like, I mean, listen, I'm a pretty big deal here. I got a master's degree in this stuff, and I'd like to use some of those terms I paid a lot of money to learn. And like that's actually not for them. That's for me.
Yeah.
And so, yeah. So who do you serve? Like, what are the key targets? I mean, who have you worked with? Digital transformation, is this just for the big multinational companies? How does this work? What's been the story? Who have you served, Ben?
Wow, it's a fun story. It's been a while, but let me touch base on the point you made before, because I think it was so good, Scott, which is, it's really important as leaders is that we bring our teams along by making things approachable. And as consultants, our job is to sort of make things plain for those that we're serving. Too many times consultants have, we do get our value and prestige from using fancy words. It can also be a tactic in order to sort of make people feel dependent. But I think the most powerful people that I've seen have really figured out, like, look, I want to share knowledge, and my goal is to make sure that you're able to connect with it and understand it so you can make good decisions on your own. And that's that kind of shifting from this concept of like, how do I create this dependency to how do I sort of be a trusted partner that's walking with you? Mm-hmm. And that's an important, trait as a leader. And it's one of those big things that we hold ourselves to as consulting organizations, which is like people should walk away with an ability to understand fully what we've done so they can carry it forward. And then typically we get brought along because they want to bring us along. Yes. The things I'll tell my teams is like, be so good, no one wants you to leave. Different side of this is like create such a dependency no one can leave. And I think those are two different mindsets for it, but you got to really challenge yourself. This is how do I do that? I've had a privilege of being mentored by John Maxwell, and he has a, phenomenal saying, which is like, you got to put the cookies on the bottom shelf, and if you think of, and he's also modeled this thing, which is if I give it all away, more will be given to me. If you let yourself, I encourage, all of us is like, our job is to sort of make things, simplify things so that others can understand and learn and run with you, because what it will do is it will free you up to learn the next thing, as opposed to holding on, because you can't hold on to knowledge and hoard knowledge and also be learning knowledge. It tends to be, those two things do not work together well. And it comes from and it's so important that we do that, because we have to because that's the way we bring people along, and that's the way that we become really trusted in other people's lives, because they realize like you're there for them. And as opposed to when you use these big fancy words and you make it, because really you're having them there for you, and people sense that. The other part that's really important in the same spot, and I had a different mentor of mine, that Scott Beck, that gave me this thing, which is like simplicity is a form of mastery.
Mm-hmm.
Ooh, yes.
And now simple can also be lazy. And this is why these two things get so confused in most of it. And you and I have seen that, where people will make these statements and you look at this and like, that doesn't work. Well, because, and so what you want to do is you can always test whether or not simple is lazy by playing it forward. It's like, we'll take that advice and play it 2 steps down the chessboard, and what happens? It breaks. All right, well, that someone just said something pithy but lazy. But mastery is this movement from low power, low complexity, which is what laziness can be. It's much memorable. Then all of a sudden, like as you climb up the thing, it becomes high power, but high complexity, because complex things, strategy is hard. Mm-hmm. Effective strategy, when you look at it, there's an elegance and a beauty and complexity to it. And what you do, though, is a lot of people just stop there and they just share from that place of complexity, very powerful, very complex. Most people can't understand it. And what you want to do is you want to force yourself to go to the other side of that power curve, where you have high power, low complexity. That's the beauty of simplicity. It's the definition of mastery, as Einstein says, to take things away until nothing else can be taken. It's this whole distillation of what we have to do. It's the Q times A times E beauty. That's a beautiful scenario that Matt shared with you. And that's, now you can, when you break it apart, you realize, oh, that works, that hunts, and so we should be driving those two things, because when we're willing to sort of bring things down into simple, what we've done is we've forced ourselves to hone our craft and our ability to a place where we can make it mastery and powerful, but yet approachable. And it also shifts us from making it about us to making it about them. And then we move into the beautiful place of being trusted advisor in someone's life.
Hey, real quick, this podcast only grows through word of mouth. That's it. So if there's any part of this podcast that you think someone else should hear or would be helpful for something they're working on, it would mean a lot to me if you would share it. The whole reason I do this is to share the helpful stuff I'm learning with more people than I can reach in person. It could be via text, DM, whatever's easy. You hit the share button and you can help them and me in 5 to 7 seconds. Thanks. This is a lot of work, but man, these are some of the most valuable things in my life, is the true trusted partners. And this is part of why I don't try to do it all alone, is because the process to get all to that stage, you and your team have been able to get deeper in that on the technology side. I know just enough of the complexity to know when to put my hand up and be like, well, it depends. Okay, why don't I just call Ben for that answer? And that's part of the value of this, when you really have someone trusted like that. This is my zone that I can operate that way in, where it's true and deep, but I can also frame it. It reminds me of Richard Feynman, who said, if you can't explain it to a 6-year-old, you don't truly understand it. And by the way, he was one of the great physicists who helped with the atom bomb and all that stuff. And so complex things. And he's like, yeah, if you can't break it down, that's the final level of mastery. So that's
our challenge that we in ourselves towards, is to make sure that we can do that level of approachability with what we know.
Yeah.
Yeah. You have such an amazing skill set, Ben. I mean, it's not easy to take digital transformations, which are extremely complex. And you just spoke about the digital side, plus the people side, to make it sticky within an organization who's ready for it at the right time, right? There's a lot of complexity in this, but yet how you said it, I'm kind of like following your curve, like how you started to say how you do this did put it into more simple terms. I'm now more curious about like how, more hows. But before you go into that, when we think about customer service and our brands, we attract a certain client. So going back to Scott's question too, now I'm curious, like, who have you worked with? Because it's like a meeting of the minds, right? Like you're taking your amazing talents, and you said this earlier in the beginning of this podcast recording, when you pair what you do so brilliantly with others who have opposite strengths and talents, it's just magic. So can you tell us a little bit about your magical stories of transformation?
Yes, I'd love to do that. And right now it's been a really fun journey for me. I'm in that unique place of kind of transition between kind of two parts of my life, which has been great. So for the last 20 years, I have had the privilege of founding and running a boutique digital transformation firm called Intevity. And we build next generation customer experiences for private equity, private equity backed companies, growth oriented enterprises, and we've also worked in that startup space where we brought in initial products to life. So I've had that journey for me for 20 years. And then I've just most recently, as in 3 years ago, established a new entity called Servant.io, which is taking all my experience in doing digital transformation work for these Fortune 1000 companies, and bringing that over towards to serve the church. So faith is a massive part of my life. It's something that who I am. And I had the privilege of, just through the service that my wife and I did in a lay pastoring, lay counseling position, we just kind of saw that the church was struggling to step into this digital age. And
I was just going to say, this is not things most people put together, is like high-end startup digital and the church. Most people, I'm thinking church and they're thinking like old hymns, right? Robes and red carpets. I mean,
Yeah, there's opportunity for transformation there for sure. Yeah.
wow, that's fascinating, man.
yeah, it's been one of those great joys in my life. And actually both of them are, it's interesting when you're transitioning as a leader, there's this part where what I've learned is seasons are amazing things. It's a gift to us is to have seasons because seasons allow us to honor every part of our lives. I have such a joy for the work that I've done with the team at Intevity. My partner George stepped into the CEO 2 years ago. George, and
Hey,
just
George is awesome. Yeah.
incredibly sharp leader. And he's like, Ben, I see where your passions are emerging to. Let me step in and run what we built together. And which has given me a chance to sort of start to really spend more and more time really pursuing what I'm doing at Servant. But there's just a strong parallel to it. Every organization goes through, organization or industry really goes through these moments of transformation. And so how do I bring this expertise for doing that for 20 years at Intevity into serving kind of the broader kind of church community? Has been a lot of fun.
Okay, so let's talk about that because I think there's more than a few leaders listening who are maybe facing something like this. They've got a passion or a vision or something that's emerged, and but like they're in a spot running something. How do you find that? How do you hand that off in a way? Because these things usually they're probably like a digital transformation, right? If you've done the math, it's probably 70% failure rates on good transitions. I mean, frankly, maybe part of why I'm asking is this is my story. Why I even got into organizational design and strategy and leadership development, all that stuff is because in my early career, I worked for some leaders who were really nice guys and totally wrecked their transitions. And some famous ones I won't call out now, but like big organizations that the handoff was bad and the crash and burn. And I liked both of the guys in the process. How do you do that? Because I will say, I mean, I know George, I know you, I've seen some of this. It's working. Like this one's Intevity's rocking. The new organization, which I guess you haven't said, I said earlier, it's Servant from the intro. Intevity and Servant are both rocking. You've got everybody still likes you. How are you doing this transition? Because this is not what I see most people go through when they try to do a big left turn.
Yeah, that's so grateful for that. And well, one of them is it's about it's time. It's good communication over time.
Hmm.
The reality is as leaders is that you have to constantly be navigating changes in your world. Good leaders are highly adaptable while having very strong convictions on in points of view in the marketplace, in points of view for culture. But we also have to be marked by ability to sort of be adaptable to new realities that are coming in. Like new realities, is some of them are external market forces are new realities. We all serve customers. Even if you're serving another business, you're serving the customers, because at the end of that business is another customer, is a customer, right? So we're all serving customers. So, and consumers change. So we have to be adaptable to understanding the change in the consumer mindset. We also have a workforce. We have to be adaptable to the change in workforces. Whether we're this whole hybrid office, this whole return to office piece, this whole all virtual. That's a change into it. Technology is also creating, change. If all of you by now need to be like, if you're not paying deeply attention to what's happening in the AI world, that was just going to come up and it's just going to clobber you if you don't, right? And so as leaders, we have to have strong conviction, but we have to have high states of adaptability, right? And so to be adaptable means that you have to ultimately drive change. Because if we think about the classic, and you do this so wonderfully, which is vision creates strategy, which creates structure, which then creates the tactics, right? It's a very much of a progressive piece to it. And so as the vision can be constant, right, with slight changes over time, but your strategy should be highly adaptable. How do you then go ahead and then bring the structural changes, which is many times people moving seats and processes being established, right?
Or
and that
digital tools, right? Yep, those are all baked into the structures.
Yeah, all baked into structures. And so to me, that means that you have to, as a leader, be out front, constantly communicating and signaling both proactively and passively where you're going. Because organizations, ability to thrive has a lot to do with the way that they feel. Like, are they feeling a part of a winning culture? Do they feel like they're bought into the vision because they actually know? You can't buy into something you don't know about. And so as I've been working this transition, we've been doing it by just communicating and taking the time to make sure that we're driving the alignment with the team members and helping them understand the change, addressing what is both the stated fears and unstated fears. Wow. The idea is like, are you leaving because you don't believe in what we're doing? And so, as opposed to like, I believe that I believe deeply in what you're doing. I believe there's a new leader to take you there, and my job is to come in alongside this, George as a partner into support Intevity and its growth. Like that's both a stated and unstated fear. So as I've been able to sort of lean into those pieces, as being a startup, every year helping them realize that we're within Servant, we're going to rethink about our structure to make sure that we're understanding what the market wants, and we're adjusting the products and services we bring to market. How do I help them signal way in advance, expect this? So that when you're coming in from a landing, like you think of an airplane, right? The pilot says, hey, it's going to get bumpy. So when bumpy happens, no one freaks out. Imagine flying on a flight and the pilot doesn't say anything, this level of unease and uncertainty that everyone has because they just all of a sudden get jarred. They don't realize it. They're like, hey, is this going to be over or not?
I've done worse. I've literally, in an effort to make it feel better, say, oh, this is going to be great. There'll be no awkward moments. Everything's going to be perfect. And when the normal bumps happen, it actually makes them more anxious because they're like, it's supposed to be good. What's going on? Yeah. There's a counterintuitive wisdom to like just call it out. Let's talk about the fears. Let's say, hey, when we make these changes, it's going to be okay. So,
yeah. It's making me remember a question in just change management and working with organizations. We would always ask ourselves as a team, what questions do we hope the team doesn't ask? Because we would be afraid to answer them, but they're going to ask. I've been on like so many, whether it's team meetings, webinars or whatever. And there's that one bold person. And I will say I have been a bold person at a time during an organizational, during an organizational transformation. Yeah. The question that I wanted to know that they weren't addressing was what happens to my job? Right? Because when change happens, people get so uncertain. So I love that you're saying addressing what did you say? The expressed and unexpressed items that are happening so you can get ahead of it and have that clear communication and transparency, which ultimately builds trust.
Right? I especially love the way you said it though, Caitlin, like what are we hoping they won't ask?
Yes, because they will ask it. Somebody will.
Leaders, listen, that thing you're hoping your team isn't wondering about, they're wondering about it. You are the only one who doesn't have that they're all talking about it. And if you don't speak up, they're going to make up answers. I've seen this, and they don't make up reasonable, rational answers most of the time. They get
Yeah.
really creative about the explanations on what's really going to happen. It's nuts.
Yeah, it's like the shadow as a kid going to sleep and you see the shadow at your window, right? You're like, what is it? It's the boogeyman. Like,
Yeah.
even as adults, we create boogeymans.
Dinosaurs
Like
have come back to life. Clearly, that's the only explanation for that shape.
That's
Yeah.
right. Yeah.
Yeah,
So I love how you're explaining
more often
that piece.
lives, but they're not, So,
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Okay, so you've got the clear communication, you're working with George and these handoffs and is setting the future plan, right? That vision of what it's supposed to look like and all of that as you I'm going to put words into mouth, so correct me, but my golly, you're doing all of that and working on your next passion. So how does that work for you?
yeah, so what I found is because that question gets brought up a lot. And one of the tips, going back to the last point that I like to use is that I always use this phrase, or I like to use this phrase, which is like, hey, if I was in your seat, this is what I would be thinking.
Hmm.
And when you do that, all of a sudden is like you get a double benefit for them. One is you get to address the question,
Yeah.
and the second is you get to be you get to be you build even deeper trust because they're like, oh, you're actually thinking this through more, and people just want to follow leaders that have their best interests in mind.
Right.
And that's the point of what we need to communicate as leaders. And as I'm sure everyone that's on this podcast, like you're sitting there yourself and you're like, I do have the best interest of my team in mind. Our key is not the fact that we don't. The key is that whether or not they hear us say that we do. And that's so important that we don't miss that space of being able to say, like, I'm for you, I'm thinking through it, even when that means I have to make change, which and sometimes change means I have to let people go.
Right.
And so I'm not afraid of doing what is right for the organization and right for the people at the same time. And getting a chance to sort of talk them through that is a big part of helping them to kind of see that as opposed to just having them assume on it, right? Because then they're like, not only like I'll make up something weird, but I'm thinking like, obviously Ben hasn't thought about this.
Right. It is really thinking of me.
Right. You haven't thought about it, which is kind of nutty. But Caitlin, on to your next question, which is how do you manage it for those that are kind of in transition windows, or those that kind of live a life where we're kind of like a polycentric leader, where we have multiple leadership responsibilities across organizations. My biggest advice for that, and this is why I don't think people, I'll watch, young talent in their career saying, I want to be a polycentric leader. I want to have multiple places. And I'm like, you can't. And it's like, I'm not trying to, like, I believe in creating avenues for people. So I'm not trying to keep the little guy down. But what I try to say is like, it's all about what is the level in which you can fly at consistently.
Mm.
So if I have to kind of dip in, think about flying a plane, where as leaders of a mature organization, I can be flying at 40,000 feet consistently. I can move over and fly at 40,000 feet over here. And it's not too much of it because all it is distance. If I have to then go over and I have to drop down on the ground and then I have to bounce back up, you create this, if also an altitude is involved, it's distance and altitude, that creates a real challenge for context switching. So I find that you can switch context of either problem set or you can switch context in terms of level of detail. You can't do detail and context and problem set. Those end up being too much for leaders to be able to go do. And so the best leaders that I found that are running these organizations tend to have a very consistent management style, and they have an ability to sort of stay at the level of detail that is consistent, that allows them to move naturally back and forth, and also learn from the patterns that they get a chance to see from the multiple things that they're involved with. And so that's how I've been able to, when folks are like, how do you manage that? And then, I have the privilege of advising a few companies and from a board position, so my plate's certainly full, is I was saying, like, I try to solve the same problem, same class of problem. I never want to solve it the same way because I don't believe in prescriptive answers. I believe in principle and framework driven answer, but I want to solve the same kind of, like, bring me in for this level of expertise. Like, I love customer intimacy. I love thinking through the different customer experiences that you can create, the digital experiences, the digital products. I know how to build product, like I know how to do 0 to 1 well. I know how to sort of activate really big, someone gives me a big vision, I know how to activate it, right? That's the types of problems that I'm always solving. And I'm like, all right, I'll solve the same problem and I'll solve it at the same altitude. that's what gives me that mobility. And then I'm able to tell folks that's how I'm able to get done what I'm able to get done. Which for those that are curious, and then, but from sometimes they're answering a real fear, which is like, can I follow a leader that is only fractionally commit, that only has fractional attention? Right. And so you answer it like that's, I'm answering both of those questions.
Yeah, so I hear two things, and this is really good. One is clarity on what kind of work you do and the way you want to do it. The clarity. This is my specialty passion. This is how I approach it. I know the zones that I want to show up in versus trying to do all things to all people. That overwhelms anyone. And the second, you have to actually get a team and empower the team. The only way to stay at the 40,000 foot is that you have a trusted team who can handle the 10,000, 1,000 and ground level. And because if not, somebody's got to go swoop in. So sometimes I see people try to transition and they don't have the team set up, or they won't. Maybe this is one of the keys to nod to your leadership. They won't let go of the old thing properly, right? If you're at 40,000, you can empower people to do, but I see a lot of leaders who are still regularly swooping down to grab this piece because they want to tweak it just a little bit and make it done their way. And how you can't transition if you're not willing to empower a team to do that. So I see clarity and an empowered team is what allows you to really show up and lead well without having to get your life overwhelmed and sucked into stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. But as leaders, you do have to have the competency necessary to push in and understand what might be broken quickly, but we can never afford owning it, and you also
unpack that, because you're like, sometimes I have to be aware and capable of stepping in if something breaks, right? But you just said we got to do that without owning it. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, so the part of it, when we're seeing like every problem has a crux. Like if you look at almost anything that you're facing, there's probably one or two things that, if solved right, does the unlock.
The kind of core hinge that it's all baked around. Yep.
And so as a leader, you want to be able to sort of spot things that are broken quickly. Sometimes you're seeing past where your other leaders are at the moment. And then it's be able to go ahead and be able to say, no, this actually matters. Because what experience has taught me is two big things, right? The big things that are actually really easy to do. Like I don't sweat that. But the small things that will kill me.
Ooh, yeah.
And so leaders have to, like, that's what experience gives us. We're like, that will kill us. That won't. And so, I'm like, all right, well, I'll just give a quick answer. I'll be like, hey, I can delegate that one. But the intuition to be able to say, no, that will get me. I got to go ahead and make sure that we get that solved. And then when I go look to get it solved, because, as a leader, there's only the biggest thing we're just going to fight for is our time. How does our leader, and another mentor, mine gave me this idea of limiting constraints, which is like, what is the three things that as a leader, only you can do that have to get done for the organization? Or even as I does you, what are the three things that have to get done for the organization that, if not solved, will constrain the organization? Because your job as a leader is to constantly free up from those moments. And so how do I go ahead and put my attention on it? But then how do I ensure that I'm not the one that's actually solving it in long term? I got to help who the leader is to kind of see the solve that's there, to be able to sort of slice the knot where it's necessary. If it's a blunt force, problem set, a blunt force problem that can be solved that way, or to sort of think through the idea of how do I sort of structure things in a way that kind of releases the knot if it's one of those things that requires a bit more delicacy. And so the ability to sort of identify the things that will get us, identify the things that are holding us back, and then being able to sort of step into those spots and then do it through your team so that you don't own it. That's a real trick. Because many of us, if we're type A's, want to be the one that, like, we want to either be a hero, which is an identity thing, or we just have a strong preference, like, I want this done. And so in that solving it, I'm like, the goal is to get it solved. The goal is to make sure the solution and strategy that's applied is effective. But then the goal is not to make it a preference, because then you're requiring someone to solve it your way, which means they have to bring all of your experiences to bear in order to kind of carry that all the way through. And that doesn't create sustainability or scalability.
Yeah. Man, I think we could go on and on, but I know we need to wrap up soon here. So maybe we'll just have to have you come back and drill into some of the cool stories and stuff. Ben, it's awesome. I love the clarity and your ability to take something complex and be able to name it. I mean, you do what you called out that we need to get better at doing. So, dude, always awesome hanging with you. Thanks for spending some time with us, man.
Thanks, Scott. Thanks, Caitlin. It's been an absolute joy and pleasure to sort of be with you today.
Guys, there are links, as I mentioned earlier, in the show notes. Check out Ben and his team online. If you want to actually succeed in keeping up with the latest, coolest tools and show up where your customers really are, honestly, we can help you design the kind of cool experience and customer you want. But the building of those tools, don't come to me, go to them. This is who we go to. So have a great day, everybody. And man, see if we can just get a little more clarity in our life and take it to the next level. If you enjoyed this episode, you might want to sign up for our weekly newsletter. It's all new content with the same themes. You can subscribe for free and learn more about how we partner with our clients to build legendary companies at swazconsulting.com. That's www.swozconsulting.com. And if you want to get access to the actual tools and techniques that we use with our elite consulting clients, check out our online program at legendarybrandsacademy.com. That's www.legendarybrandsacademy.com. Greatness is possible. You just have to build the right engine.